Thanks very much, Anne, and it's wonderful to be here today. As Anne said, my name is Marina Valenti, and I'm part of the Associazione Sindrome di Alstrom Italia. Let me just, oops. Sorry, I just have to move, whoops, the phone, nope. Can I go back there? Right, this is Valentina, and Valentina is 22 years old. She's our limited edition. We have 2 children, but Valentina has Ulstrom's. So I imagine that many of you are Ulstrom parents, and so you know what it's like to accept a diagnosis. So accepting a diagnosis for Ulstrom's is shattering. It's enormous. It's devastating. And we really found it difficult to come to terms with it. I think that up until that moment in time, I thought that I was in control over everything. And suddenly I realized that I had control over nothing. And it was really difficult for us as a family to sort of get back on track. And when I look back in hindsight, I think that if there's something that I would sort of change in my whole experience of life up until now, it's that moment and the reaction to the diagnosis, to accepting this new situation, because we seem to waste so much energy. And as John Lennon says, life is what happens while you're busy making other plans. But how do we go about changing our situation? So I think I'm going to ask Catherine to show the video now. I think I'll go on to the next. Can you actually share the video with your screen now, Catherine? Okay, so this comes from the film The Labyrinth, and I'm just wondering how much of it resonates with any of you. It's a film with David Bowie. No, go ahead, Catherine. Thanks.
Did you say hello?
No, I said hello, but that's close enough.
You're a worm, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right.
You don't by any chance know the way through this labyrinth, do you?
Oh, me? No, I'm just a worm.
Oh.
Come inside and meet the missus.
No, thank you, but I have to solve this labyrinth. But there aren't any turns or any openings or anything. It just goes on and on and...
Well, you ain't looking right. It's full of openings. It's just you ain't seeing them.
Well, where are they?
There's one just across there. It's right in front of you.
No, there isn't.
Come inside and have a nice cup of tea.
But there isn't an opening.
Of course there is. You try walking through it. You'll see what I mean.
What?
Go on then.
That's just wall. There's no way through.
Things are not always what they seem in this place. So you can't take anything for granted.
Hey!
Hey, hang on!
Thank you. That was incredibly helpful.
But don't go that way.
What was that?
I said don't go that way. Never go that way.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Right, so I'm going back to
Yes, if you go back to your slides now.
My slides now,
Fabulous.
Thank you. Sorry we had to do this, but okay. Let me do this right. No, I'm still not on the Rex one. No, I'm trying to get back to the other page. Okay, so some of the worm's advice is really precious, and I'm not sure if some of you got this, but the worm says you have to walk through it. And I really think that this is so much part of our experience when having to accept an Ulster diagnosis, because we have to walk through the situation. We have to hold our hurt before we can let go of it. And another thing the worm says is that things aren't always what they seem. And this is very true, because if I think back and in hindsight, I realized that I really thought things were going to be a lot worse than the reality actually is. Another thing, it's full of openings. You're just not seeing them. And that's so true. If I think back to that moment in time, we have to look for those openings. Very often we're just not seeing them. So how do you live with Ulster syndrome or support someone with Ulster syndrome and still survive? not survive, but thrive. I think back to a situation when Valentina was hospitalized for a period of time. And while we were there, she contracted gastroenteritis. And obviously, she wasn't able to keep solids or liquids down. And so I was feeding her some lemon tea, sugared lemon tea on a teaspoon. And because we were in hospital for quite some time, we were going along to the school in the hospital. And there were other students, there were other babies there. She was really little at the time. And I was there with her as well. But of course, any experience in a hospital, I usually interpret as a negative experience. And it's not something that I usually look forward to. But sometime after we'd been in hospital, Valentina came along to me and she said to me, "Mommy, when can we go back to hospital so that you can feed me tea on a teaspoon and we can go to the school there and there are other children and you can stay there with me?" And in that moment, it dawned on me that it's not the experience in itself which can be difficult, but it's how it's sort of handled. And when you have somebody with you and walking along with you, then, you know, it's manageable. And I think it was lots of little moments like this that led me to understand how important it was to emotionally look at our situation from a different point of view. And of course, good old Shakespeare, long time ago, already realized that there is nothing either good or bad, but it's thinking that makes it so. And I'd also like to share the Dalai Lama's words with you. And, you know, he says we need to learn how to want what we have, not to have what we want, in order to get steady and stable happiness. And all of this is sort of called reframing. And reframing is a way of changing the way you look at something. And when you change your experience, when you change the way you look at it, you also change your experience of it. And it can turn a stressful event into something either highly traumatic or a challenge to be bravely overcome. And it can depict a really bad day as a mildly low point in an overall wonderful life. And it can see a negative event as a learning experience, something to build on. And definitely walking with Ulster is a learning experience. And I have learned so much positive and have grown so much from this experience too. So there's another experience just recent, which taught me something else. And with our Associazione Sindrome di Alstrom in Italy, we had a project, and there was a psychologist involved in this project. And this psychologist, during the pandemic period, found that there were many friends and colleagues who were contacting him and asking him to help a friend or someone in difficulty with words of encouragement or words of comfort. And he found that he was repeating the same thing over and over again. So he set up a site called Parole Buone, which I'll explain later on. And later on, he wrote a book as well. And these parole buone means good words, but to put in a good word in English means something different. So I prefer to translate it with words of encouragement or words of comfort. But I realized that along life, I'd sort of collected these words of encouragement and words of comfort and made them mine. And it was what was helping me and our family to go on, to face life and to thrive, not just to survive. And so some of the words that Sergio Story uses as science, wisdom, vision, harmony, sharing. And at the end of each of his chapters, he also gives a resilience pill, a piece of advice that helps you. I'd really look at it as sort of instruments. And I really do think that once you've made a conscious decision that you're going to make the best of it, then you need to find these instruments to train you to see life through new eyes. And I think that my words of enthusiasm are firstly acceptance. Life is what it is. If you can't change something, then you can change it by, seeing it differently. And just like that experience in the hospital where I thought that it was so negative, because we were living it in a positive way, Valentina's interpretation of it was positive. Another thing is light-heartedness. Life can be so funny, so let's see the funny side to it. And there is always something amusing, and we can turn things into something far more light-hearted. Equilibrium, finding our equilibrium. Now, I think in the very first call and very first contact that I had with Dr. Pietro Maffei, when we were right at the beginning with the diagnosis and everything, one of the things he said to me was, as a family, you will find an equilibrium. You can find an equilibrium. And I think we held on to that. And it's true that it's not what you knew as normal, but you can find your new normal. And you have to work towards that. But then, life goes on. Very important is sharing. Sharing means finding someone else who knows what you're going through. And this is why associations are born, because in an association, you can share your emotions, but you can also share bits of advice, because with rare diseases, doctors are going to be giving you lots of medical advice, but then there's all the practical day-to-day advice that you need as well. And so sharing is really important, but sharing is not only sharing and having fun together, as I was saying before, but sharing also means doing positive things together. And I think with the associations, we really need to understand that you also need to be the change that you want to see. And we're all have to be an active part in this. Now, in the UK, you're all very fortunate because you've got a well-established association with lots of funds behind it. And it's more or less the same situation in the USA. But I think in many other countries, the situation is not as well established. And so it's up to all of us. Anything that happens depends on us. But I think despite all of this, we all need to see what we need to do, because in the end, besides spending time together, helping each other, etc., we were all working towards finding a cure. And I don't think there's anyone here who would say that this is not true. So what can we do? Well, I think any patient, and I'm not sure that patients realize this, that by sharing their information anonymously, and I underline anonymously, you really, by pooling all this information together, we're helping doctors look at tendencies, map things out, and we create interest for scientists, for researchers. So this sort of thing, which might not seem important to you, really is important, besides the fact that we're putting all our information in one place. Okay, which is beneficial for us. So I think it's also very difficult as a patient with a rare disease like Ulster to live on your own, detached from everything else. And I think in countries where we really do need national groups, because national groups can work towards changing the situation within the country itself. So that might be accessibility to certain forms of care or medicines which we need. And it might mean striving to change legislation, etc., so that we can improve our quality of life. And very often a small little organization like Ulster's needs to link up with umbrella associations, with alliances, so that we can face the government and try and change things. But we also need to stick together internationally, globally. And, you know, it's at this moment that I really, all my thoughts always go back to Jan Marshall, because it's thanks to her that these amazing things are happening. And of course, Robin goes in with that as well. So thanks to ASI and thanks to our new global organization, thanks to Kerry, and thanks to Anne, because I've seen some really fantastic things happening today, and amazing to be able to see what's happening in China and Palestine. You know, these things are really so encouraging. I wanted to share some photos of our Associazione Sindrome di Alstrom Italia, just to show you some happy moments before the pandemic came along. And our association really enjoys getting together in true Italian style. We organized quite a few holidays, etc. And our young people also enjoy getting together for mental health workshops, etc. We've been able to do some of this online, but we do look forward to being able to meet face-to-face in the near future. Where am I today with Valentina? After all those moments of extreme worry, etc. Valentina is now 22 years old. She's at university. She's in her 3rd year. She's studying literature and languages. She's extremely active. She keeps us on the go all the time. She never gives us a moment of respite. these are photos of her just recently. She does rollerblading, and the team she is with organized a Valentina Day in which they did 20 kilometers basically uphill, and she managed to finish that. And then here we have a photo. She now has a boyfriend in Rome, and she goes backwards and forwards. Rome comes to us, and she goes to Rome. And so life is very busy, and certainly life is a lot better than I ever envisaged right in those early days. So I wanted to share these moments, so especially for the new families, for those just joining in, who've newly arrived and possibly are facing those moments we faced so long ago. It's going to be a lot better than you thought. Are there a lot of problems? Yes, there are. Do you face obstacles? Yes, we do, but you'll get through it. And I'd like to leave you with these words where Charlie Brown says to Snoopy, you know, we only live once, Snoopy. And Snoopy answers, wrong. We only die once. We live every day. So enjoy the rest of your ride. And thank you very much for sharing this time with us.
Thank you, Marina. I've lots of chat messages coming through to say a huge thank you to you and how inspirational that was. There are a couple of questions, but to keep us on time, if I may,
sure.
Choose one of those questions, if that's okay with you. One of the questions says, what did you find were the challenges with schooling at school?
That's enormous. That is an enormous question. I just give one bit of advice, and that is don't let anyone tell you that our kids don't need Braille, because they do, and fight for it. And I'm willing to share a paper that I actually published on that, and the importance. It can maybe help people with schooling, but it's really possibly you could contact me privately, and it's a long story all on its own, but it's one step at a time. Every age has a different aim to be reached.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you very, very much.